So I've worked in a lot of treatment centers, and I know the risk of relapse shoots up around that time of year, around holiday time.
Wow.
It really does. It brings up a lot from past experience, anxiety about what could happen, as you're saying, so anticipating something not going so well. Not to mention it could get like kind of a boozy time of year also, so people struggle with that.
You're listening to Big Sis Energy. Welcome back to Big Sis Energy. I'm your host, Makenzie.
And I'm your other host, Malia.
And today we have a very special guest, licensed clinical psychologist, Dr. Blair. Thank you so much for coming on Big Sis Energy.
Thank you for having me.
We are so excited for today.
As am I.
And today's topic, we are talking about all things mental health and actually how social media affects mental health as well.
Yes.
So we thought might as well bring on a professional and get some real answers here. We're so excited.
Awesome, me too.
We gave you some cards.
Okay.
And you can flip through, and they're just going to be, some of them are kind of more fun questions.
Okay.
And some of them are more personal about like how you started and how you chose this line of work as well.
Yeah, just kind of like get to know you questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. All right, well, let's do it. In your opinion, what social media app has the most toxic effect on mental health? Okay, so I gave this one a lot of thought. And I'm thinking Instagram. I feel like Instagram has a little bit more of that, like you only post with the perfect image and only present this certain thing,
Right.
that I think can be really hard to scroll through and try to base the way you're living and looking and being against that sort of portrayal, which is not necessarily authentic.
Yeah.
Picture perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
sure.
Exactly. TikTok has more vulnerability. I really appreciate it. I saw in the news the other day that they had like 175 billion clicks on the Mental Health Awareness Day.
Wow. Oh, that's awesome.
Isn't that awesome?
That's awesome.
If someone were to click on depression or trauma or anxiety, like, or these keywords, not only do they get the content they're looking for, but also resources.
I find myself when I'm on Instagram, I'm trying to post something, I'll post it, and then I kind of disappear from the app as soon as possible because I feel like for my mental health, I don't like consistently scrolling because it is just pictures and people can edit them. You don't know if it's actually what the person looks like in person.
Totally.
And that's why I like TikTok a little bit better because it's not 100% perfect. Of course, there's still filters, but you get to see a little bit more of the people's personality and they're just general who they are as a person as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kenzie and I always talk about that a lot. I'm like, I don't know. I have a love-hate relationship with Instagram because I love posting pictures and things like that, but I'm like, you look good, and that's pretty much it.
Soundbite, right?
Yeah,
it's just
right?
like, it's just one little, in that one particular moment and doesn't paint the whole picture.
Yeah.
I also notice myself interacting more with my actual friends, people who I know in real life on Instagram
Yes.
versus on TikTok. I feel like it's kind of, oh, who do I see at this? It's the For You page, so you don't really know who you're going to come across. TikTok is my favorite platform, I think, as well as YouTube, because it is a little bit more long form. And I love listening and watching podcasts, educational podcasts. I kind of love it all. Instagram is probably my least favorite. I had to pick one.
It's more personal. Like, I feel like on TikTok, everyone's just kind of themselves. And I love that. And same thing with the podcast, too. We can have, like, real-life conversations.
And people want to see that.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I want to see that from people. I'm like, I want to see, like, the real you.
Exactly.
And I think with TikTok as well, for me at least, I'm not thinking about, oh, my old best friend's gonna see this, or people that I know in real life are gonna see this. On Instagram, I'm like, oh my gosh, people I know are watching me. I'm like, oh, I'm a little scared because people I know are watching me or judging me, and maybe they're not. But that's always going on inside my brain.
Yeah, I feel it's like the stigma of being picture perfect. That's what Instagram it's known for.
Exactly.
You know?
I hope that breaks at some point.
I know. I was like, I want to be better at like being more authentic on Instagram and bringing that from TikTok to there, you know?
Totally. I think Instagram's future will depend on that. What is one thing that surprised you about being a psychologist? You know, it's just kind of a weird job. It is. It's kind of a weird job. It's intriguing to some people. So it could be, sometimes I avoid saying it. Like if I'm getting my hair done, or if I'm just like out and about and I just kind of want to be like just a normal person or whatever, you kind of like, I'll dodge the question, which I never thought I would, because I'm so proud to be a psychologist and do something I love to do that's helpful.
Right. Why do you feel like that is?
I don't know. Maybe there's like is she analyzing me question? You know, I had a personal trainer say that to me the other day.
Aww.
Not even mine. It was just we were passing each other at work. And he's like, are you analyzing me? I'm like, are you counting my steps?
That's perfect response to that. We'll dive into some of the questions that we got from you guys. I asked on my Instagram story. We're bringing up Instagram again. Here we go. No, I'm just kidding. Instagram. But I asked on my Instagram story what you guys want to hear or questions that you guys have about mental health in general, and then also specifically how social media affects mental health. So we have a few questions for you, and I'm really excited to just kind of have an open conversation as well. How does social media affect the attention span of those who use it?
You know, I think they are very sophisticated in their algorithms, and with the constant feed and the interests that you have, right? Like you'll get things that come to you. It's quick. So of course, as that goes up, the speed of attention span will likely go down, right? We want things quickly and that immediate gratification. So that's a very, I think, almost like calculated response. Right. But that's most likely what's happening.
Like the more that you use it, the less attention span you might have gradually.
Yeah. Possibly. Yeah. It's almost like they capitalize on the addictive nature of things. Right. Like almost like slot machines, the way that they're quick or whatever. And it really is a quick release of dopamine in the brain. And we are hardwired to engage in behaviors that give us that little dose.
That's kind of like a natural feeling. So for those of you who are addicted to social media, just like me, I spend a lot of time scrolling on TikTok. But I feel like that's something that we all kind of struggle with and maybe even want to cut back on. I know for me, same thing with what you said about clocking out. I'm like, social media, I have the most blessed job because I never thought that we would do content creation as, a job for sure. And when Malia and I first got TikTok, Malia's first thing was like, I want to delete this app because I'm already addicted. It was like 5 days on the app in 2019.
I feel like it affects kind of your productivity, at least for me sometimes, because I'm like, okay, I need to do certain things and I don't need to always be scrolling. How does that affect people's productivity?
Well, it's certainly a time sucker, right?
Yeah,
like you could be like, I'm just going to go for a quick little gander and 2 hours later. Right? So just on the basis of time, for sure I could see that impacting, whether you have other goals of the day.
Yeah, you just kind of get sucked in sometimes.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I have to do laundry. Let me shut off my phone entirely because it's that much of a distraction.
Right.
At least for me. Like I have to power it all the way off.
Right. Which is a good boundary to have, right? So that's certainly a thing. It's like we don't need to be victims to it. We can come up with good ways and tools and tips.
You can even set screen times.
Yeah.
Like there's certain apps you can be like, okay, I'm going to use TikTok for an hour a day. Tops. That's all I'm going to do. Or 30 minutes you can do, even for parents. I know parents can put like those initiators on their kids' phones as well, which I feel like is a good thing, obviously.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Why is it that we let social media affect how we see ourselves?
I think it's almost a natural thing that we do. We've been doing that since the beginning of time. It just used to be in person, right? So I think there's an element that's pretty natural to that.
Okay.
However, as we were saying with Instagram, if we're holding ourselves now against someone who has this entirely curated image, the gap there could be so large that it could impact us negatively. So if I'm like comparing me and this is my worst day to someone on their best, filtered and that could really, have some negative impact. Or maybe even the flip side. Maybe you're feeling great about yourself and scrolling and seeing and kind of judging or nitpicking people. That's also, even if it, on the one hand, in some surface level way makes you feel better about yourself, I think in our core, that doesn't feel good.
Yeah. And then you get in the habit of, in person, you might start judging people more as well and noticing small things when being hypercritical is not a good quality to have.
It's a double-edged sword.
For real.
It really is.
And I feel like that does happen a lot on social media, because even people that get hate comments, like some people will comment certain things that I would never even notice. I'm like, people do sometimes can hyperfixate on a video or like even themselves. Like I know I can hyperfixate on myself even before I post a picture on Instagram. I'm like, oh, this might look weird. And then I look through like thousands of pictures. I'm like, okay, Should I post it? Should I not?
Right.
And then you're constantly judging yourself,
Yeah.
even as the person who's maybe posting it.
Yeah.
And that's why I feel like I leave the app. I vacate the app as soon as I post, because I'm like, okay, even if there are negative comments, I don't want to surround myself with that negative energy.
Yeah.
Or even if it's good comments, sometimes I'm like, I can't, if I focus too much on the good comments, I will let the negative comments affect me
Yeah.
as much, or, you know, on the same
More
level.
maybe, yeah.
So having
Yeah.
like a good balance between the two. Yeah.
For sure.
That's good.
One of you guys wrote in, I struggle to find a healthy balance of living in reality and living online. What is a good way to limit social media use without feeling like I'm missing out?
Okay, so like that qualifier without feeling like I'm missing out.
Right.
Right. And I want to validate that because that's not a good feeling at all.
FOMO.
Yeah.
Right. It's
Yeah,
real.
no.
Yeah. It really is. So I don't want to say something like, oh, just put it down. Because
Right.
that doesn't answer the whole question.
Right.
So on one hand, if there's hobbies that you can do, especially with friends, that would be a great way to put it down where you're still with people. Whether you're playing a sport or whatever, going out to eat, and you can just like put your phones down and
Socialize.
Yes,
Actually be
exactly.
engaged in the conversation.
yeah.
Right, because if fear of missing out, maybe it's really fear of feeling disconnected, and we can connect in other ways.
Oh, that's beautifully put. I really
Yeah.
like that, because I feel like I can feel like that sometimes. I'm like, oh, well, I see someone else is doing this and someone else is doing this, and I'm just sitting in my room.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, maybe I could leave
Yeah.
my house.
and you're watching from like an
Yes.
outside perspective, but then
Right.
you're like, oh, like I wish I was there.
Yes. And we are interconnected whether we like it or not, right? We
Yeah.
really, really are. And sometimes we can adapt to feeling more safe in solitude, which is different than isolation, okay? So
Right.
there's like a bit of a difference there. But whether we like it or not, we need one another. We really do. We don't do well in isolation. So if now, on top of feeling alone, we think or see or believe or whatever, it's real to us in that moment, that everyone else is together or having fun, I mean, that really hurts.
That's
Yeah.
true. Or even, I mean, I remember like in high school, you know, maybe you would be just chilling, not doing much, and then you see all of your friends hanging out. And that can be so hurtful when it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't get that invitation.
It's
No
devastating.
no one reached out to me and asked if I wanted to go, and these are all my friends hanging out, and that can be isolating as well.
Absolutely.
And that's one thing I feel like about social media, that maybe those friends, they don't mean to hurt your feelings.
Right.
Maybe, you know, they thought that you were busy or whatever the case may be.
Right.
And their intentions weren't to put you down and hurt your feelings, but that's still how you felt, and that's still valid as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's so right.
Oh, okay, this one. So I have a few examples. Okay. So there was a Twitter thread earlier this week.
Okay.
And it was actually about, I'm like, let me pull it up because I have some examples. Kind of went viral on TikTok as well as Twitter. A lot of people were talking about it. But basically it was men who like hate their girlfriends.
Wow.
And that was like the title of the thread. And then there were a ton of little, you know, comments and likes underneath it. So I'll read you some of them. When you keep messing up on purpose so she can break up with you and she keeps forgiving you. And then it's like a crying face, like, oh, I wanted her to break up with me. So he's basically saying, like, I don't really like my girlfriend, but I'm just kind of in the relationship and I'm not going to initiate that breakup. And then another one says, you'll be having a bad day. When she hugs you, it becomes worse.
Ooh.
And then
Harsh.
there's
I know.
another one. I'm like, they go on and on. When you are wondering why you have such a peaceful day and it turns out she's giving you the silent treatment.
Ooh.
I know. So the reason why I said those, and I know it's kind of random to just randomly bring up, but how do you protect your mindset and emotions when someone else's experience online makes you sad or angry? Because I remember earlier this week, Malia and I are, you know, scrolling on TikTok, scrolling on Instagram, and I see this and I'm like, I got upset about it. I was like, even though it's not my boyfriend loves me and he doesn't secretly hate me, you know?
Yeah.
And I know that's a truth in
Yeah.
my reality. I'm like, it still makes me, even though it's not my situation, it makes me sad for the woman who maybe they're reading through this and maybe their boyfriend liked it and they saw that, or he made a comment and I'm seeing what other people are saying and it affects my mental health and, oh, I got sad and now I'm angry. So how can you kind of protect yourself?
I can totally relate to that question because I just got out of a breakup. So it's like, when I see things like that on social media and constantly reminded of certain things or how people are, a lot of people tend to kind of categorize people. And so I feel like it's sad because obviously there's good guys out there, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
But I feel like seeing all those, it kind of can make you a little upset. And I think probably vice versa to like other people seeing certain things. It's like, it makes it kind of a reality for you, even though it's not technically a reality, you know?
Right.
Yeah, it was upsetting just to hear it right now, and I haven't heard anything about this. It really is. You know, I was even thinking with Instagram or whatever, you can mute. Like I do want to empower people to, if there's a stimulus and your reaction is negative over and over and over again, you can set the boundary and spare yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? So you really can do that. But perhaps interest, you know, gets the best of you, or whatever it is, and you want to see more.
You're just kind of curious.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's where my head was at.
Sure.
Exactly.
And
I'm
then
like,
even if
what
it's
are
not your
people saying?
boyfriend or anyone that you know,
Exactly.
it's like, it can make you angry because we're sisters. We all have sisters, you know, and maybe our friends we're all in the sisterhood together. So
Exactly.
like, you know, now my arms are folded. I'm like,
what did
I'm
you
protective
yeah,
of
exactly, right?
My friends,
like,
everybody.
Exactly. So you can, like, you know, just stand up for women as a whole.
Yeah.
Also, I could see how that could make you suspicious. Like,
Yeah.
I never even thought of this before.
Yeah,
right? Like, I'd rather not know that these
I
inner
know.
workings of the male mind. You know, I was much happier before I saw this.
Exactly. And that's exactly how I felt. I was like, how do I protect my reality? And I think for a lot of people who are watching, maybe they got upset by seeing that.
Yeah.
And like us all, you know, that's
Mhm.
a normal initial reaction to get
Sure.
upset about something like that.
And you kind of go down a spiral.
Yeah, the
too,
rabbit
because,
hole.
like, you see
Mhm.
one and you're like, oh, what? And then you're curious and then you keep going down the rabbit hole. Because that's what I found myself doing. I'm like, okay, why do I care about how other people are, like, their relationships? But it is sad, though, because, like,
It's
there's
also
a reality
interesting.
for a lot of people.
Yeah,
You know?
and it sounds like it's like confessions of, you know, of these thoughts, and
Yes.
and we wouldn't even know this, right? So maybe there's
Yeah.
some like underground bro
Exactly.
code situation happening. So, you know, I would just say the more you feel your blood boil, or if you were to feel really sad, to do your best and you know, abort mission.
Yes,
truly.
Stay out of it.
That's
That's what I
yeah,
need to tell myself
yeah.
because it's not a good rabbit hole.
I told Malia, and she's like, actually, don't finish your sentence. She's like, I don't want to hear the rest of this. And I'm like, valid.
Also, because TikTok has a For You page, like, the algorithm is too good to where, like, when I was in a relationship, all I would see was, like, happy relationship stuff. And then as soon as I leave the relationship, all I see is, like, negative things about relationships. I'm like, oh, this isn't fun.
It's like fueling the
goodness.
fire.
Yes,
and that's
yeah,
scary because
yeah.
why is the algorithm that good? Why do they know
Right.
what's going on?
It's wild.
It's scary.
Yeah, it is.
It's a little too, like, analytical and, like, spot on.
It
you know?
is. I know. I swear Instagram knew I was pregnant before I announced it.
Oh
Like,
my
I was
God.
getting, like, maternity clothes, and I was like, whoa.
You're like, are you guys
I
listening,
probably
watching?
Googled something.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's creepy.
It is. It really is.
Yeah.
Because all the ads are so spot on.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
I'll be
the
thinking
ads.
about something, and I'm like, I don't think I typed that in, but maybe I did.
I must have.
And
yeah.
they know. They
Uh-huh.
know.
The next one I have is, in your opinion, why do we subconsciously seek others' validation on social media?
Again, I think it's another thing that we've done since the beginning of time. We really have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But even as children, we need validation from the adult. We depend on them for our survival, right? So I think some of the things that we do when we learn to do that are very adaptive, so almost like going over a rainbow, like it's adaptive, and then it becomes, the clinical term would be maladaptive. But in other words, it's just like no longer working for you, right?
Right.
So it tips a point, which is to say, for adults, we can talk about that. Teens is another story, right, of why they're doing it. I think it's still very much as your like forming your own identity.
Yeah.
We're holding ourselves up to Instagram or to social media in general. It's also 24/7, so it feels ruthless. It really does. Like, I'm glad it wasn't around when I was in high school. I like just kind of missed that. But I have 2 and 5-year-old daughters, and it's scary to think once they're in that really malleable, really just that age where you're impressionable,
Yes.
and you
Yeah.
could, like, one experience or one decision in one way can really lead to like unfolding of events
Yeah.
for a long time.
What
And
kind of
it's
shapes
a
them, right, growing
fragile-
up?
Yeah,
That's
for sure.
kind of what scares me, because I think
Totally.
Gen Z, and we're Gen Z, we're the first generation to grow up with social
Right.
media,
Yeah.
with the having 24 accessibility to social media. And that's scary, because
Yeah.
then you're constantly, I mean, who knows how many hours a day comparing yourself to other people. And of course that's going to have a negative effect on our mental health when we're constantly comparing and idolizing something that's not even a true reality for maybe the person that's even posting it.
Yeah.
Totally.
You know? So
Yeah,
that's
it's scary. So, you know, and then when you think about like, okay, 18 to 24, maybe that feels a little bit different. Like, I want to really empower people to take a moment, take a beat, really ask yourself, is this working for me? Is this not working for me? Like, how is this truly making me feel?
Yeah.
And set some boundaries around it if the answer is not good. Also, it's not all bad, right? So,
Yeah.
like, for some people, it's like, well, thank goodness we even had this during the pandemic or whatever.
Right.
For some people, it has formed connections and launched careers and has done so many good things also.
that is so true.
That is so true.
Yeah. I mean, we've made so many friends that I would have never met in Arizona, that live in New York, that live in
Yeah. Like
New
all over,
Jersey, that live
literally.
wherever, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, I shared earlier, my family's all in New Jersey, and I can maintain relationships with my niece and nephew and my family members, and even get details of their day, right?
See what's going on.
Yeah.
You feel more connected. And I feel
Yes.
like that's
Exactly.
something that's so beautiful about social media.
Me too.
People together, kind of like a community.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. And people have met, people have fallen in love all over the world on it. So
Yeah.
I like that we were shedding some light on the positive
Yes,
too, right?
Yeah.
Because there is so much beauty truly in social media.
Yes.
And I think that because we're all addicted to it,
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
that's the nature of all the algorithms like we were talking about, it can be negative because of how much we're using it.
Yeah.
How
So-
much? And also, I would say that there's probably some pre-existing things that can make someone more vulnerable to it taking a negative turn,
Right.
such as low self-esteem, difficulty with interpersonal relationships. So if someone already experiences social anxiety or maybe struggles to connect with people, has other forms of anxiety or depression, has some other pre-existing things, I would think that individual is more susceptible to social media having a more negative impact.
Right.
And like you said too, setting boundaries is like kind of the key thing,
Yes.
because there's pros and cons to everything, and having a healthy balance with literally everything in life. Like you could use that instance for anything,
Yes.
but it's so important because you don't want that to consume you, and you don't want that to be your entire life, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
We have another one. It was a scenario from somebody who wrote in, why is my first reaction to compare myself to a beautiful woman that I see on Instagram when I know deep down another woman's beauty does not take away from my own?
I think we're always kind of keeping score a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's just like an impulse to do it. I don't really know the answer. I don't
Right.
want to sit here and think I have all the answers. I don't know. I think there's a healthy level of it.
Right.
If it's done in a way that you leave either overly boastful or really low, then that doesn't sound like that's really working for you.
Right, like a
Yeah.
positive thing.
Yeah.
And even like the people that you follow on social media, I feel like is so important, because
Totally.
I notice myself, like if I'm constantly scrolling and all I see is like maybe edited photos, or I keep filling my brain with that type of content, and maybe it's not super empowering. I know there's this one girl on social media, and she talks about the difference when, what your body looks like when you're standing up versus when you're sitting down, and you're in a natural state, and your body looks different, and no one shows that side on social media. No one shows themselves hunched over,
Right,
in
the
a
double
chair,
chin.
the double chin, everything. And I think that that's such an important topic, because that's real life. We're not always
is.
standing up and posing and popping our hip out and sucking in our
Exactly.
stomach. You know what I mean? So it's important to have those realizations. I think what you said earlier about the self-esteem, how that could be a component that's a negative, that could make social media a little bit more negative for you.
Yep.
I feel like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of people who are going through middle school, high school, those ages, when I was in middle school and high school, I had a very low self-esteem. And I feel like that's kind of a common factor in a lot of younger people who maybe they haven't tapped into their confidence yet. And maybe they don't know who they are yet. So what kind of tools do you feel like are good for maybe younger people to set for themselves?
You know, that's a good one. And remember, if you are younger or in middle school, I would hope that someone's parents, adults in their lives, would help a young person that young when their bodies are changing, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they're starting to develop, whatever it may be. I would hope that the adults would help.
Right.
Yeah.
People, you know,
Yeah.
would help them, because we can't assume that they even know what the word boundary means.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
And it would be almost strange if they did.
Yeah.
Because it's not age appropriate at that time.
And you think about, I know you said developing, you think even about maybe your friends are developing and you're not. And you're like, oh, I'm the odd man out and I'm, you know, not with everybody else. And even in that way, you can start comparing yourself.
Yeah.
Because like you said, it's even before social media, we all compared ourselves.
Yeah.
We used to get a break from it.
Yes.
That's the difference, right? So whenever we got home from school or from the sport or whatever, once we got home, you could really just kind of like, you know, throw on the sweatpants and exhale and like just take a breath from it all. And I feel for teens who don't really have that. It's 24/7, and who knows what the bullying and the susceptibility to some negative feedback could be. People are cruel.
Because people are a lot more bold, I feel like, on social media because
yeah,
they're behind a
totally.
screen, you know?
They can have a
Absolutely.
great profile picture and no one knows who it actually is. User 1, 2, 3, 4.
Because in
5,
reality,
6.
most people like probably aren't going to be saying that to your face, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, totally emboldened, and
Yes.
it's not good for anybody.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I feel like it's good to always kind of like subconsciously keep that in the back of your head of like, okay, sometimes like people maybe don't mean what they're saying, or they're just saying it just to say it.
Yeah.
You know?
And I'm
So-
curious from you guys, so like at what age are people getting their first accounts? Do you know? Like,
I feel
because
like
you have
it's
your
young.
younger sister, right? So she's like your insight into teens.
Well, it's funny because our parents, they kind of parented us differently, obviously, because I'm 5 years older than my youngest sister.
Okay.
And so we weren't really allowed to have social media when we were younger, which I felt like was good. At the time, I was like, oh, everyone has Instagram. And I'm like in 6th grade and everyone else has Instagram. But you feel like as a young girl, for me, like that you're missing out. When in reality, it was just for my protection, because social media can be toxic, but it can also be good.
Right.
I feel like it just depends, though.
I see a lot of young girls who comment on our videos, and we meet a lot of young girls in person as well who maybe they're even in middle school. So I feel like right around the 6th grade mark, so 10, 11, 12.
Okay.
I feel like that's around the age that I start seeing like electronics, social media coming into play.
Yeah.
Is right around like 10.
Oof.
Yeah, and that's pretty young.
It just gives me goosebumps.
That's pretty
thinking about
young,
my
yeah.
girls. Like, oh Lord.
And I feel
know.
like it's like you were saying, setting boundaries again. Like, even if you are allowed to have, you know, social media, Instagram, TikTok, it's like you only go on it for a few hours a day, or whatever your parents kind of see is good for you.
Right.
And then if something maybe is affecting your mental health, taking a break from that. And even for us too, when we were, I think, what was it, before we went to high school, we were allowed to have Snapchat, but only people that we knew.
Okay.
So,
Well, actually,
yeah.
it was only like 4 girls that our parents approved. It was like 2 girls from
They
church,
actually knew that.
and then our childhood best friend, and people that our parents, they also knew their parents, and that their parents were good people, and people that they could trust.
Aligned
because
with the values and things.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
So I
That's
think
fair.
I think in our instance, our parents were a little bit more like proactive, I feel like, with that.
yeah.
And that's maybe not the case for everybody. I've had people, and this kind of hurts my heart so much, because we've had younger girls who are in middle school DM us about their mental health. And I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. I can't give professional advice, and I tell them that. I'm like, you know, we can't help you in the way that I would truly want to be able to help you.
Yeah.
And I can really only tell you my experience with my mental health, and that's the best I can do. But seeing, you know, the girls who are in 6th grade, 7th grade, who are having a really hard time.
Yeah, it's
and
heartbreaking.
It's really sad, you know, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
it breaks
And
my
most
heart.
of the studies are done in that time, that age group. It's like 10 or 12 up to 16, and that's when you see some severe consequences in social media, body image things, depression, and
That's hard when you're young, because you're still growing up too. I mean, the brain doesn't really develop until is it like 20, 25?
Yeah,
So that's crazy.
Yeah,
That's wild.
It is wild. It is wild. That final like prefrontal cortex where you can like weigh the pros and cons. That really executive functioning and play the tape out and the rabbit hole where we can start to see the aftermath. They don't really have the ability to do that. It's more in the moment.
Yeah.
Because I even think about, like Malia said, when our parents would put rules on the table, I'd be like, you guys don't want me to have fun? You want me to be different than everybody? You want me to not have social media? And I'm like, I see it as a bad thing.
Right.
But you don't see the whole picture.
You don't see the whole picture.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also, I think when I was younger, I was very naive. And I saw the world as rainbows and butterflies. And it's perfect.
Same. I still struggle with that.
Yeah, me too. Like, everything's fine. Exactly. And I feel like you have to go through some life to realize that maybe everybody doesn't have your best interest. Or you gotta have to be weary about, should I make this decision, or weighing out the pros and cons like you were saying. So
what are the best ways to get out of a slump, maybe caused by seasonal depression or maybe a breakup, those type of things?
Okay, so seasonal depression is a lot about lighting and getting outside.
Okay.
So the best that you can, flip the windows, the shades open. If it's cold, bundle up and go for a walk. Really do everything you can. They even have these amazing lamps that provide a more of a natural light, and keeping the light on is like the most basic intervention for seasonal depression.
That's so interesting that light has, or even like the sun has so much effect on like your mental health
and your mood.
Would that just be the like vitamin D?
It's a vitamin D, and it's something about light.
Okay.
It really is. We kind of rise and fall with the sun. That's most of our like natural circadian rhythm. And I know, like, what is it, up in Alaska? There are times where they only get a very brief amount of light. I mean, that's tough. And people really have to be proactive and get those lamps or whatever they need.
And it's cold, too.
Yeah.
So that probably doesn't
brutal,
help.
right.
Oh my gosh.
And they have times where it doesn't get dark, I believe, as well. So it's just like 24/7 sun.
That doesn't sound fun either.
I feel like it'd be hard to go to sleep.
Yeah, right? Some serious blackout blinds.
That's interesting.
So can you have seasonal depression and be in a place that's mostly sunny? Because I feel like for me, and this is a more personal question, around September, like every year, kind of like clockwork, I get into a rut and I start feeling like a little bit more insecure, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm a really confident person, but right now I'm not feeling super confident, and it's almost like a flip of the switch, and I'm not really sure why that is, but we live in Arizona where it's super sunny, and I'm like, is that possible?
I kind of feel that way too. I always say August is just a doomed month. And right around August, September. I don't know if the facts behind that. I wonder if there's like a bit of a grief of summer being over. If you think of the majority of our lives, come September, we just kind of, like, the script was laid out for us. We went to school, we did whatever. So maybe when September comes around, there's some symbolism in our head of like achievement. And perhaps, I'm just speculating here, that has something to do with our self-esteem, or if we're feeling low. Like, now we're like, okay, it's business time. We've got to get on the grind, and we put a little bit more pressure. Maybe our perfectionism could flare up a little bit more that time of year.
That's true. That's actually a really good point.
Yeah.
I think about, too, I saw a video about this. It was Thanksgiving comes around, Christmas comes around, and maybe you have relatives that don't have your best interest at heart.
Yeah.
And maybe and this isn't our case, I love everyone in my family, but maybe there's, that one person in your family that's, maybe they give like unwanted advice to you, or maybe they comment on your appearance or your weight, and you're already a little bit insecure about that. Or you just don't want people commenting on your body, which is totally valid.
Right, exactly.
But maybe that's something that worries you too, is, okay, I'm going to have to go to all of these events with people or things that you can't control, or negative comments that you can't really avoid, and that kind of worries people too.
Families
or even just like going back to school.
Yes. I've worked in a lot of treatment centers, and I know the risk of relapse shoots up around that time of year, around holiday time.
Wow.
It really does. It brings up a lot from past experience, anxiety about what could happen, as you're saying, so anticipating something not going so well. Not to mention, it could get like kind of a boozy time of year also. So people struggle with that.
Yeah. Well, because there's so many events and like parties and themed things like that. So it's kind of constantly like an event that happens.
And people feel a little bit more social, maybe if they're under the influence of something.
Exactly. So it really is a hard time for a lot of people.
Yeah. Or even, I mean, I think about if you've maybe like lost a loved one, and Christmas or Thanksgiving is like a very sad time, because those are the times that you used to spend you used to spend with that loved one or that
Your
family member.
Yeah.
And that would be, I mean, detrimental.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. It brings up so much.
And you think for people that maybe tend to go to substances, whether that's like drugs or alcohol, what advice do you have to them just for people that maybe struggle with those kinds of things?
Yeah, using substances is basically saying, like, I'm going to take something outside of myself so I can regulate how I'm feeling inside.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So drugs and alcohol are quick ways to self-regulate, but it's like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back.
Yep.
And not for everyone, but for, even still, it can keep us stuck in our ability to overcome adversity.
What kind of numbs you a little bit.
Exactly. So it's definitely not a sustainable way to do things. And this is a heavy topic too. Addiction could be probably a whole episode in and of itself.
Yes.
And anything is addiction worthy. Anything that also gives you that relief, or that dopamine feling. So it could be food, it could be sex, it could be gambling, video games.
Right.
Anything that has that escapism. I would say if you set a goal for yourself that, like, hey, I'm not going to do these certain days or whatever, and you do it anyway, that could be a red flag. Or if it's impacting your ability to function in your relationships or in your job or whatever, then certainly it's time to seek some help.
Yeah. Or becoming dependent on it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you feel like for people who maybe they're going through a hard time and their first initial reaction is to go to a substance, that might be an issue?
For sure.
Maybe it's they don't want to come to terms. They don't want to address certain problems that they have or certain emotions that they're feeling, and they can push those aside and maybe like feel better.
Or it could be like
for a short amount of time.
Exactly. And when I'm facilitating groups, one of my favorite questions to ask people, it's just so rich and people really like, whoa, is I'll ask, like, what was a difficult emotion in your household to express? Or maybe there's some unspoken rules that you don't talk about XYZ emotions. And that helps to build insight into what feelings, and they're typically the harder feelings, the bigger feelings, that we're automatically, if it was not permitted in our household, we're going to blacklist them as like dangerous, too much, maybe fear of getting flooded or unraveling. Maybe people feel shame around that. Like any kind of vulnerability is just like not okay.
Yeah.
And a quick fix is, maybe I'm going to have a drink instead, or blah, 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 whatever kind of pops that pressure bubble. Unfortunately, what we resist persists. So it might work then and it might work again, but typically there comes a time where it doesn't work anymore, or maybe the pressure bubble's too big that it requires more of the substance, and now it's getting a little scary.
Yeah.
Right. Where you didn't maybe realize that you were addicted to something, and now it's like, okay, if this is a constant thing where this is my first initial reaction to go have a drink or whatever it may be, then that might be like a red flag where maybe you do need to go get some help. If someone is going through that and they think that they might have like an addiction, or they just genuinely need help but they can't afford therapy, what do you think is a good maybe substitute or way that they can overcome that? Because I mean therapy is pretty expensive, and it's not accessible to everybody.
That's right. And health insurance will cover it, and it covers treatment centers, and even Medicaid will cover certain treatment centers, so there is help if it is to that extent. But to answer your question, I would say even talking about it, I feel like there's this like secrecy and silence and shame and judgment just breed these things.
That's so true.
Right? So like even AA is amazing. It really is, just for the fellowship. I mean, people could take it or leave it or whatever, and we're not going to get into the controversy of that, but just the numbers wise, it has helped so many people. So stepping into a place where when you say, hey, how you doing, Jim? And they're like, oof, I was this close to picking up today, or whatever, and can just be so honest and raw with their emotions, that can be so, so, so helpful.
And people that won't judge you, because everyone's kind of in the same boat, and
exactly.
they can understand.
It's a beautiful thing. It really is. So let's say though the person was a little bit younger or whatever and didn't feel comfortable going into like a meeting, even just talking to a friend,
Yeah.
telling someone that can help hold you accountable. Like maybe you say like, oh, you know, it's really kind of like around 5 o'clock that I start feeling squirrely and the pressure of my work of day really hits me.
Right.
Maybe at that time you guys can go for a hike or go out to dinner or whatever, and just ask for support.
Yeah.
It's okay
So
to ask for
important.
help.
Especially even like, I know for me, I can struggle with like my mental health and just, you know, maybe scary thoughts or just like depression in general. But like dealing with that, I felt like it helped me so much actually talking with people about like my family
Yes.
members for sure. Cause I remember a couple years ago, I was dealing with it like pretty heavily. And I took the initiative to actually tell Makenzie, and she's like, you should tell mom and dad. And she encouraged me. And it
Nice.
really did help me. It felt like kind of a relief
Ah,
that was
yes.
lifted off my shoulders, because you feel so alone and isolated when you're dealing with that kind of problem. And then once you actually come out and say it, it's like, like it doesn't completely help you, but it helps a little bit.
It helps.
And any help at
yes.
all is like, I feel like
And I'm
it's so
glad
beneficial.
it helped
You know?
And good. That was some good sisterly advice right there,
Yeah.
right?
I
And we're
think
so harsh on ourselves.
we are. I know,
we
you
really are. Like, we're
if
our
this was
worst
someone
critics.
else, we'd be like, why didn't you tell me sooner, right?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
we really can. We hold on to things sometimes too longer than we would hope that we would, and we
Yeah.
can be, you know, shameful about whatever. But I
Right.
love that when you came forward with what was going on with you, that you gave yourself permission to get support.
Yes. Yeah.
I think a lot of us too think of like the worst case scenario, like maybe someone has even DM'd me before and they're like, I don't know how my parents are going to react because I deal with depression and anxiety and I haven't told them and I don't know what they're going to say.
Right.
And I mean, we think about, you know, in previous generations where mental health wasn't taken maybe as seriously, and that can kind of be an issue with maybe people's parents and how they feel is like,
Yeah.
oh, they're going to say that, you know, mental health isn't a problem. And depression, I mean, I've heard it too, like depression isn't real when it is.
Yeah.
And a lot
that
of people
hurts
struggle.
even more, right? It's
It
almost like the
does.
risk of that kind of response, like the pain that would come from that kind of response,
Right.
is enough to deter you, I would imagine.
Yeah.
That was my thought process too before even telling anyone, you know. I was like, oh, how is everyone gonna like think of me? But I was lucky enough that everyone was, you know, receiving that information. They wanted to do
love
anything they
that.
could to help.
Yeah.
Leah first told me, I was like, I could see you were struggling, but I didn't know if you were comfortable sharing with me yet. And I wanted to wait for you to feel that comfortability and be able to open up. And I would, now that we have gone through that a little bit more, if I see her kind of closing off, I'm like, hey, how you doing on a
Nice.
real
Yeah.
level, not just, oh, you know, how was your day yesterday,
Right,
but
like,
how
for
are
real.
you emotionally and mentally really feeling, and trying to cultivate relationships. Maybe if you don't have a sister, with a good friend, someone that you can really trust, because those conversations are really important.
They really, really are. And maybe this is one positive outlet for it with social media for the child whose parents perhaps, or the person whose family maybe has different beliefs or values or whatever, that's not as privy to mental health.
Right.
Then it's nice that they could voice it perhaps on some platform and have feedback, and just hearing someone say me too. You know, it's just
I
like,
relate.
yes,
Yes.
it's really, really, really helpful.
I feel like that's the nice thing about social media is like we
Yeah.
have so much access to that, whereas like you don't feel alone. You know?
Yes, and this Gen Z vocabulary, I'm like, hell yeah. I really am. I love it. I love the vulnerability. I love the openness to talk about all sorts of things, mood, sexuality. I
Yes.
feel like
Yeah.
perfectionism isn't as toxic in this generation as it was in previous generations.
That's
And
one
I
thing
really love it.
I love about Gen Z and generations to come. I feel like we're open to having hard conversations.
Yeah.
And I think we're all open to just talking more about what we're feeling.
Exactly.
And once we can all do that, we're going to realize, okay, I'm not alone. I think a few days ago, I posted on my story that I kind of have been feeling a little bit more kind of like insecure and like a little bit, I would say, I use depressed lightly because I feel like I've seen like true depression in like a depressive state. And I feel like I'm just very sad sometimes.
Okay.
And I was sharing that on my Instagram story, and I was like, these are the reasons why I don't like to post about this, is because I don't want people in my life to feel like they have to check up on me or feel like they, when, you know, I have Malia and we talk so much, and I have my mom and my little sister and we have those open and honest conversations, I don't want people to feel like they need to reach out and almost feel like, is it really real that they're reaching out, or is it just because they saw my Instagram story? And then I think about too, I don't want people to think I'm trying to gain pity from other people and say, oh, you know, I'm struggling right now because of this and this, or just struggling period, and not giving an explanation why. I don't want people to feel bad for me when there's so much going on in the world that is truly heartbreaking. And I think people can relate to that too, where, oh, my struggles are so insignificant compared to what's going on in the world, and they're not valid when they really are.
Totally. Yeah. Comparative suffering is not okay. We saw that a lot in the pandemic. It's like, well, you don't have kids. Well, you get to have kids, or where you, or this or that and everything. And it really, so how do you push through that? I
think the first step for me was really sharing and getting past that thought process of, for one, I don't want to be fake. And I'm like, I don't want my life to seem perfect to people, because I know it could seem that way when I do have struggles that I struggle with on a daily basis. And Malia and I post a lot of fun, energetic content that we want to be a light to the world. But I don't think talking about something negative is taking away from being a light. So I think that and I got a lot of positive feedback. I think a lot of people were like, I relate. I don't want to talk about it on social media because I don't want people to feel bad for me. I don't want people who are going through something worse to feel even worse about themselves. And I think we all struggle with that. And I think just like opening up, even though it's kind of a bigger audience and it's a little scary to share that, I think it really is important, and it can help if even just one person, then that's kind of my main goal, or I can relate with one person.
That's awesome. I salute you. I really do. You guys are like trendsetters when it comes to this sort of thing.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I think validating your feelings and knowing that just because maybe in your head someone else is going through something that's maybe worse, it doesn't mean what you're going through isn't bad either.
That's right.
You know?
It's so true.
Yeah.
And then now I don't feel great. And now I'm even guilty.
Yeah.
For how I'm feeling.
Exactly.
That's like, you know.
Yes.
That's rough.
I try
that's a cycle.
Yes, it is a cycle. It is.
I try to get out of that mindset, but it can be challenging sometimes, especially because it feels like it just is a loophole that you keep kind of going through the same mindset or process of thinking when you're used to that process of thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
We got a lot of questions about imposter syndrome.
Okay.
So are there any ways to overcome this?
You know, so imposter syndrome, just so people are aware, it's basically, well, usually if highly successful people could, especially if it's earlier in the career, most likely the younger people, as they're achieving success, can suddenly start to feel like they don't deserve it or don't have the skills, or like how can they live up to now this thing that they've become. So that's what imposter syndrome is. To overcome that, again, talking about it, right, is a great thing. You're not alone if you feel that way. I remember feeling that way when I first started seeing clients who not only were they older than me, but they had children older than me. I was like, what am I gonna tell this person about life? Even though that's not necessarily our goal, right? But I remember feeling that way also. I think it's normal and maybe even healthy in a way to feel that, right?
Yeah,
for sure.
So the fact that you even get to feel this sort of thing, maybe a little bit of gratitude of where you've come.
I think too, a lot of people, and I can attest to this as well, is like, you don't feel like you're in the moment, and you don't feel like you're living in the moment, because I think for me at least, going to really cool events and then I'm like, oh my gosh, why am I here? I'm like, what? Like, and all of these people that maybe I follow them on social media or I look up to them and they're kind of an inspiration to me and I get to see them. I'm like, why? I'm just from Arizona. I'm just like a little girl from Arizona. And I'm like, why am I here? And I think that can be kind of a hard thing to think about, you know, constantly, or it can make you insecure in those moments and hold you back from expressing yourself, talking to new people. And I think that that's something that I struggle with sometimes. And maybe that's a good time to like employ that front part of the brain that's just finishing its development and look at the facts, right? Look at track some of your success. Look at the things that you've done and like throw some facts out there, because I'm sure there's some really good ones that have keyed you up to get to the place where you are. I think that I feel like I can relate to this with is we worked with Briogeo, which is a hair company, and they had, I think it was 3 billboards go up of our face and our hair, and I was like, what did we do to deserve this? But then I look back and think, the girls who have curly hair, who maybe they struggle with not straightening it or not using heat, and they're not comfortable in their own skin, and they don't see people like them all over social media. I'm like, if I can inspire them to think about my 14-year-old self.
Representation matters.
And I'm like, I think about my 14-year-old self, and I didn't see anybody with curly hair ever.
There you go.
And I'm like, and now if I can be that to somebody else, that's so inspiring, but I still don't feel like I deserve it. And I still don't feel like it's real. Because people ask me, they're like, how do you feel now that billboards? I'm like, I don't know.
That's the I was talking about
good and humble. I think this is a humble thing, right? Spin a positive light or a positive reframe on this sort of thing. I think that's humble. It shows a lot to your character. If you were like, then, maybe that would be more concerning, honestly, at the end of the day. You guys are just coming up in the world, like, that's cool. Just breathe. You got this.
Yeah, breathe. I feel like that's a good one. If you guys are struggling with imposter syndrome, breathe.
Just take it in.
Yeah.
And I heard someone say, and this was, I think, this was a video that I saw, but they had mentioned that if you don't feel like you're supposed to be in the room that you're in, you still got to that room.
That's right.
Might as well make the most of it.
Yeah,
and I feel like that is such a good, like, inspiring thing, because why sulk in the corner and be by yourself when maybe you could meet somebody who's a genuine person and super authentic?
Yeah, because you deserve to be there, just as everyone else does, You
got the invitation, right? And that's where the facts can come in.
Right.
Because it's our emotions that are now clouding our coming into the brain, right?
Yeah.
So lean on some hard facts. Just to check ourselves a little bit.
That's so good.
I like that.
Feelings can cloud you so much.
Yeah.
And in any aspect of life. So that's really good. After a season of being sad or depressed, how do you regain your confidence? Because I feel like for me, I can maybe get insecure when I'm super depressed or more insecure, and I feel less confident.
I would say this is one of those times. I know we said earlier that there's probably some especially vulnerable times that may make the comparisons on social media even more harmful or hurtful. This is one of those times.
Yeah.
Right? So if we're already feeling low, I would really suggest to not go ahead and torture yourself on social media, particularly going on Instagram and looking specifically at the things, right? So I know we mentioned breakup. We didn't totally get to that point, but let's say you were just going through a breakup, which you have. That's not the time to be looking at all of the happy couples in the world. Or the seemingly, let's qualify that for a second, happy couples in the world. So building your confidence, surround yourself with people who love you, who lift you up, who adjust the crown, who are there to not compete with you or put you down, but are really your people. Things that really fill your cup.
Yeah.
Whatever that may be.
I feel like that's so good. Finding what fills your cup. Yeah. Simple things you could implement into your life if you're feeling that way is try something new, like pick up a new hobby.
Exactly.
Take a dance class. Maybe you're a little scared, but take that first step. And if you don't like it, try something a little bit different.
Absolutely. Hobbies are great. Yes. It's a great way to meet people. And then maybe you're moving your body in your hobby. Yeah. So now you've got some endorphins going.
Exactly.
And you've got the happy chemicals flying around. And definitely.
A cycling class or something like that. You don't necessarily have to talk to people. So if that's a little step you could take where you don't have to talk to somebody yet. But you could if you wanted to.
The last question I have is, what's one piece of big sis advice that you would give your younger self?
Ooh. In speaking with this vulnerability, I don't even think I heard that word when I was 20. Right? I'm 38, so I'm not that old.
You're young.
But still, I think I would tell myself it's okay to not be okay. I think I came from more of that pull your bootstrap up mentality with a bit of perfectionism thrown in there. So I had a kind of that real headstrong, move forward sort of thing.
Right.
So I think that would be it. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to ask for help.
I have a question for you. How did you kind of overcome that mindset?
With work, I go to therapy myself. I'm a huge proponent of it. Also seeing that ignoring my feelings didn't make them go away. I had to live and learn some hard lessons.
Yeah.
I really did. And fortunately, I come from a mindset, I don't regret things, but I've definitely gone through some hard things that made me stop and reflect and say, oh, is this still working for me?
Yeah.
Which is to say not that it never did work for me. In a way, I'm grateful. You know, I came from a small town, and I went and I came to LA, and I got a doctorate, and I did things that maybe the people I grew up with, you know, whatever, that it was high achieving, goal oriented.
Right.
So in some aspects, I'm grateful for having had that. But then it hit a point where I was like, okay, you know, I'm avoiding difficult conversations or whatever was presenting. So I couldn't, it just wasn't sustainable for me.
Yeah.
I had to take a hard look inside.
And that's so true, not acknowledging what you're feeling and just pushing it back. Because you still have to deal with it eventually.
Eventually,
you know?
Exactly.
So that's so good.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Dr.
Thank
Blair.
you, ladies.
Where can the people find you?
Yeah, Dr. Blair Psyd is my Instagram. Sorry, Instagram, for all the shit talking. DrBlairPsyD.com is my website. I'm working with Carrera Wellness Treatment and Spa, which is going to like revolutionize treatment here in LA.
That's awesome.
Oh my gosh, that's
so
awesome.
You can keep an eye out for them.
So what does that entail?
So it's treatment center.
Okay.
So primarily substance abuse, but not necessarily. And really going into the mind, body, spirit care of it all. So they're even gonna utilize, like, did you see the Blue Zones on Netflix?
No,
It's
I
basically
haven't.
areas in the world. There's like 5 of them. One of them in California, actually, where people, most centenarians, so that most people who live to be 100 years old.
Oh, I did see that. I did see
Okay,
that.
gosh.
Yeah. So
I'll have to
like,
check it out.
and there's always like that diet. So they're going to really incorporate every bit of what helps people live long and well.
Wow.
That's so
so
cool.
exciting.
Yeah,
well, congratulations.
Yeah, that's
Thanks.
awesome.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
Well, thank you guys so much for listening to Big
Yes.
Sis Energy.
Thank you.
And we'll see you guys in next week's episode.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.